Let me say a prayer and we'll jump in. God, thank you. You are abundantly good to us. We're such spoiled babies that we can be in a room that's 75 degrees instead of 70 and be worried about it. But God, work on our hearts. Help us to just learn more about you, to understand what it means to be your people. Cleanse us, God. Cleanse our hearts from this dirty and corrupt world where sin abounds and our flesh just is so attracted to. So we just invite you again into this place and want to thank you that we can be in this place. It's such a great location and cost and just all the many things that we have that really we don't deserve in any form or fashion, but that you continually pour out on us. So we're here today because of you and want you to receive the glory in all of that. We lift it up in Jesus' name. Amen. Yeah, so we've been in this spiritual discipline series over the past 5 or 6 weeks, and we've talked about a lot of different things and looking at just what it means to live a life that's focused on Jesus, and to try and understand who he's calling us to be. So we've talked about a lot of different things, and this morning I want to talk about the spiritual discipline of friendship, and more specifically of sacrificial friendship. And so you might be kind of wondering or thinking like, would that really fall in line with a spiritual discipline? Well, you wouldn't be the only person. As I was preparing for this, we had a list of the different spiritual disciplines that we had pulled from different resources, and soul friendship or something along those lines was listed on that list, and I thought, man, I'd like to talk about that. And so as I started digging into it a little bit more, it's not exactly what was listed as a discipline, so we're going to take this and kind of run with it as far as we can. I did start off with like 4 points on this sermon and then whittled it down to like 2, and now I'm down to just 1. So we could just be here 5 or 10 minutes in the sermon, and we could be here a long time, just depending on kind of how it goes. But there's definitely something to this in terms of just this idea of really what we're going for in this series. So whenever you use that terminology, spiritual discipline, it's easy to get wrapped up and just focus on the discipline piece of that and think, okay, this is about doing something. This is about a checklist of rules. And I think all of our speakers have done a really good job of trying to buffer that a bit and make sure that the body understands that we're not going for just a checklist of rules, but what we're looking for is a transformation of our mind and soul. So away from who we are naturally in our flesh to who God is calling us to be, because there is definitely a difference in those two things. And so we're transforming from inward self-focused to outward and others-focused. And if you consider each of these disciplines that we've talked about over the last several weeks, you can see that ultimately all of these are meant to help shift our focus away from, again, who I think we naturally are. If we just wake up in the morning minus Jesus and think about how we're going to live our day, how we're going to treat people, and go about our business, especially if we're swept into the culture, our natural inclination will be one thing. And the idea of spiritual disciplines is to transform that, to think differently about life. What we have here in this life, in this moment, is literally a blink of an eye. And, the Ecclesiastes writer says, we're a mist that's here today and gone tomorrow. And so in the course of our lives, we have a series of decisions that we have to make about who we're going to be. So are we going to continue that natural trajectory of living for ourselves, promoting ourselves, getting what we can out of life and living it to the fullest? Or are we going to follow a much different route of living a life for Jesus. Because if you're looking at that and saying, I want to live with Jesus' lordship over my life, then you're saying, I'm willing to do things differently. And that's a significant step. That's not a little thing. That's a big thing. I mean, Jesus would use such strong terminology to say, you must take up your cross every day and follow me. The cross was an instrument of execution. So he's saying, and he says, goes on to say, you must die to yourself. That's strong terminology. That's not, this is something for you to consider. This is far beyond that we have to take a very honest inward look at who we are and say, where is this not lining up? And make changes. And these disciplines are about taking and making our lives something very specific with intentionality and effort. And it's always away from self and towards God and other people. If you think back and look back through these talks and what we've been challenged with as a body. And there's this inherent danger for us as disciples when we're just focused on ourselves, and these disciplines are meant to shift that focus. So we, of course, see Jesus setting the example for us in friendship. I think the world didn't even really truly understand or know what friendship was until Jesus' life. So think about that statement for a second, because there were thousands and thousands of years of people living and having relationships. But it wasn't until Jesus came and modeled for us what it meant to really be a friend that we truly can understand what friendship is. He spent time with them. He grew to know and understand them. He walked with them in ministry. He shared meals and enjoyed fellowship. There was this movie that we watched several times over the course of maybe a 5-year period early on in our church's existence, like at men's retreats and things like that. And it was just titled Jesus, and it was kind of a modern day look at the life of Jesus. And there was certainly some conjecture in there. There were some things that, you look at and you're like, did that really come from Scripture? And it's like, no, it didn't come from Scripture. It's a extension of something that, whoever was writing that thought. But one of the kind of neatest scenes for me in that was Jesus walking into a town with his disciples. They had obviously been on the road for a while. They were thirsty. They were tired. And they walk up to this huge fountain, basically. It's in the middle of this public square in a city. And several of them gathered around this fountain, and they're reaching into the fountain and, taking drinks out of the fountain. And Jesus is there, and he kind of looks over at one of them, and he splashes the water over a bunch of them. They start having this kind of water fight. And it's just this clip that just reminded me of who Jesus was as a human and how he could have possibly interacted with his friends. He was very intentional. He used a lot of effort in his relationships. And through that intentionality and effort, they grew to trust him. And they allowed him to say things to them that helped reshape who they were at the core of their existence. And some of you can immediately think of friends in your life who have walked with you and had these same kind of conversations. Ultimately, he was working at drawing them closer to the Father. And I'd like for you to kind of think of that through the course of my talk today. Garrett wants you to stop him down and kind of challenge his thoughts and thinking. Don't do that with me. Just assume everything I'm saying is absolutely correct. And if you don't think it is, you can talk to Garrett afterwards. He's a lot better at all that, a lot smarter, better preacher than I am. So definitely go talk to him. But yeah, when you think about who he was in just terms of drawing them closer, I want you to think about your friendships and your relationships. Do you have these people in your life? Are you this kind of person in somebody else's life? Because sadly enough, think about the people that you know. Think about the people you see in your work relationships, your neighbors and things like that. Do you see deep friendships like what we're talking about? I think our world is really suffering and lacking in this area. But we're called to this same kind of depth in friendships. And not the shallow stuff that we're naturally drawn to, but depth in living with our fellow humans where we are really tuned in and focused on looking outward. And just quick side note here, this is one of the problems I see with a lot of social media and kind of what we've built up as an expectation in our current culture, in our current society. We tend to make it completely about ourselves. You know, from the selfie to the statements, look at me, look how great my life is, look how much money I have, look what nice trips I get to go on. Look at how talented I am. Look at all my possessions. Look how much I work out. Look how great my kids are. Look how smart I am because I believe so-and-so. We actually share posts that are intended to make other people feel stupid, right? Because they don't agree with you. Me, me, me. And on the other end of that, on the receiving end, we just eat it up. You know, like, retweet, you know, whatever you want to call it. We just eat it up. We see that way. Yeah, because I think like you do, and so those people really are stupid. Look at all that nice stuff you have. But what would Jesus look at, and what would he like if he was scrolling through our feed? You know, it's just this kind of interesting thought of, first of all, picturing him with a phone or a scroll, like, I don't know, whatever that looked like. Thank you. Thank you. But we have to ask ourselves that question, what would he like? And I think there's a lot of things that he would see and be really proud of. And I think what he would appreciate most is when we're building other people up, when we're using our social media platform to build other people up. I see Joy do this a lot. Literally, I don't know about you guys. I'm like, how does Joy comment and be encouraging on every post on Facebook? Like, there's a million of them. Fair enough. If you're going to spend... Yeah, there you go. There you go. But, you know, there is this kind of idea behind that, you know, of being encouraging, looking for opportunities to use platforms to build other people up. And that's a huge part of spiritual friendship. But I think we can boil down most of what it means to love like Jesus and be a friend like Jesus into the idea of sacrifice. And so that's what I want to spend the next little bit on, is just talking about how as disciples we're called to be the kind of friends who sacrifice for other people. 1 John 3:16 through 18, this is from the Message. This is how we've come to understand and experience love. Christ sacrificed his life for us. This is why we ought to live sacrificially for our fellow believers and not just be out for ourselves. If you see some brother or sister in need and have the means to do something about it, but turn a cold shoulder and do nothing, what happens to God's love? It disappears, and you made it disappear. My dear children, let's not just talk about love, let's practice real love. So again, Christ set the example for us, and first and foremost in this whole idea of sacrificial friendship. John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. So I want to just have a few people share real quick. When you hear that statement, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. What does it mean to lay down your life for your friends? What does it mean to lay down your life for your friends? And again, I'd like for you can just share from where you are, and I'll repeat so the folks online can hear it.
Put yourself second.
Yeah. Joy said, put yourself second. What else?
I think as a married guy with kids, it's easy for me to feel like I have enough going on,
Mm-hmm.
and to not in the middle of a week be like, you know what we should do? Invite a couple over, or invite some friends over to go do that stuff. Or you know what I should do? I should go do this thing. So it just feels like too much.
Yeah.
A lot of the times. But
Yeah.
then that's just such a self-centered view.
Yeah.
How many people might need someone to sit across the table from them and ask them
Yeah.
what's going on in their heart and their lives?
Yeah.
That's the big one.
Yeah. Yeah, so for the folks online, Garrett was just saying, you know, carving out time in the midst of a very busy schedule, wife, kids, work, you know, whatever is going on, carving out that time to have a sacrificial friendship. A couple more.
Sharing in the joys and sorrows of life.
Yeah. Yeah, sharing in the joys and sorrows of life, absolutely. One other?
I think being willing to have really hard conversations.
Yeah.
Like not ask them just the surface
Yeah. Yeah, Christian said, having those tough conversations and challenging people. I just think, I get this picture in my mind of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. And think about what that statement means in terms of friendship. Think about that, like that. And we've talked about this before in sermons, so you guys have heard this idea that, that was a pretty disgusting thing that he did when it came down to it, to take somebody's nasty feet who have been walking around in sandals all day, that's rough. And to do that, and to say, I'm doing this, like I want to do this in a way that serves you. And so again, you get this picture of sacrificial love. That as this becomes more clear and you think more about it, it's about sacrificing who we are and what we have for the benefit of other people. Again, so oftentimes in our culture, we're clawing to get ahead. Unfortunately for young people, you see this a lot, that this is just the norm. There's a constant clawing to get ahead, stepping on whoever you have to just get to where you want to be and have, fill in the blank, whatever it is. I think that continues on into, being adults. But what about, and where are we as Christians for the people in the world who need us to just sacrifice for them, to just pour out ourselves? Time is a huge one, as Garrett mentioned, especially in the midst of everything that we have going on. In the world, we choose friends based on what they have to offer us. Okay? So now just kind of flip over to the idea or thought of being a disciple, living a life as a Christian, and ask yourself, do you have that same expectation for your friends? Is it about what you're going to get out of it? And if it is, you need to check that. In the world, we tend to stay in a friendship as long as it's good for us. This is one of the things early on in my relationship with Ronnie that he really started, hitting on. Because if I ran into some sort of conflict with somebody, I would just turn and walk away. There wasn't any kind of depth in the friendship or the relationship, any kind of roots that would hold me there, because I didn't let them go deep. So it was easy for me to walk away from those. And I can think of specific times with specific people through the years where he was like, yeah, you can just walk away from that if you want, and you'll go to hell. No, he didn't say that. He said, you can walk away if you want. That fits so much better. It was more shocking. He said, you can walk away if you want, but, what if you miss a lesson in the midst of that struggle or challenge? What if you miss the opportunity that God's trying to take to grow you, to be closer, to draw closer to Him? We typically in the world make it about our needs, and the bar is set for how well we're treated. So if we're not treated well, again, we just punch out. I'll do this for them as long as they do this for me. Sadly enough, you see this a lot in marriages in the world. We're people in marriages in the world, and why our divorce rate is so high. Because we enter into a contract with people that says, as long as you fulfill this list of needs, I'll do this thing for you in return. But covenant, whether in marriage or even in friendship, is something different. You step into that for the betterment of the other person. You're saying, I'm entering into this relationship so that you'll draw closer to God, whatever that costs me. Think about that for a second. Like, if your mind doesn't just start short-circuiting a little bit, then you're probably not human. Because as humans, this is what we naturally tend toward. We make it about our needs. I'll do this for them. But the second trouble comes along, we start looking for the exit. But as disciples, we pursue relationships even when, or especially when, it costs us something. And we think about that cost as an offering. We're offering to God. It's no different than you walking over with your paper money, which really isn't even backed by anything, and you drop it in the box. It's an offering you're making to God. How much more valuable is that kind of offering, where you sacrifice for a friendship? You say, I'm willing to give this, expecting nothing in return, so that you are drawn closer to God. This is really the mark of true Christian friendship. And I don't think you look at somebody at the start and you think, I'll bet this is going to be awful. And so this is the relationship I'm going to get in. And so I don't think you kind of square it up at the beginning and think, this is just going to be terrible, so here we go. But when God brings people together in friendship, you have to look at that and ask those questions like, is God wanting me to do something here? Is God wanting me to say something here? I have friendships that I don't necessarily like or get a lot out of, but feel called to. And so again, in that, I love that person. In that, I love the sacrifice. In that, I'm willing to sacrifice and go forward with them. And it's only when our posture towards friendship becomes less transactional that we can find freedom and joy in serving others, just as Christ served us. Christ-centered friendships are selfless and humble. We approach them with servant-mindedness to bring life to our friends, and then a neat thing happens. We end up feeling joy. We end up feeling the life from that. Philippians 2:17 says, I'll rejoice even if I lose my life, pouring it out like a liquid offering to God, just like your faithful service is an offering to God. And I want all of you to share this joy. And consider just the sacrifice of comfortability in friendships. There's a lot of different roads we could go down with this talk, but that would take a long, long time. And so we're just going to cover a couple of different things here. Just think about the sacrifice of comfortability. So the reason a lot of friendships work is because people feel naturally comfortable with somebody else. And good friendship feels natural. It feels right. And I think it's because, in a way, we're created for friendship. If you look at, why did God create man? Well, it says that we're image bearers. So that in friendships, in these relationships, we have an opportunity to model for the people that we're with the goodness of God. But I always like to just remind us when we talk about this image bearer language that it's not just that responsibility I have to model God's goodness to my friends or the people around me, but I have an opportunity to model back to God the goodness of His creation, to reflect back to God the goodness of His creation through my friendships. Yeah, isn't that neat? That God counts us worthy of that? And so when we feel comfortable, we let people into areas of our lives that are normally just closed off. And so there's a vulnerability that happens there when we let people in like that. In Christian friendship, we're willing to love people so much that we will be uncomfortable with them. I have a friend who recently lost his young daughter, and so I've been trying to spend some time with him, and that usually means time, some sort of dinner at a sushi restaurant somewhere between Wiley and Addison. And one thing I figured out in meeting with him is I like to talk. I like to talk, and I feel like if there's not noise coming out, that something's wrong with the conversation. But what has been most helpful for me with my friend in these sushi restaurants is to just sit and be quiet and to cry some. And there weren't words. There weren't words to say, what do you say? Everything's going to be okay. You want to try that one with somebody who has nerves that sensitive? So sometimes it's just a matter of just sitting and not trying to have all the words, but just to be there and to be uncomfortable, be willing to be uncomfortable. That scrapes against everything within my personality to just sit and be quiet. Because I'm a fixer, I want to try and fix things. But he just needs me to sit there and be quiet and be next to him and cry some and, pass the wasabi when he needs it. Whatever. It's just being there. Another part, like I think Christian was speaking to a second ago, is calling out sin in people. You know, when you see your friends sinning, it is incumbent upon you to have that conversation and to tell them that. Now, there's right ways to do that, but you have to step in and have those conversations, calling out sin, challenging ungodliness, asking the tough questions. And I think another thing that's really important here is just modeling grace. Because you're going to have people that you're accountability partners with, or that somehow your lives are intertwined, and they struggle. And they continue to struggle, and you say all the right things, you think, and point them to God, and you pray for them thousands upon thousands of times, and they keep going back to that situation, whatever it is. And how better do we model the love of God for our friends that we stay with them in that? That we stick with them in that, to love them and to help them through, especially ongoing struggles. I remember probably 15 years ago, and I've shared this story before, but our family takes a trip every spring out to Lake Havasu, which is on the border of California and Arizona. And Ronnie was going with us one of these particular trips. And when especially back then, I've really tried to work on this because of this conversation, but travel is meant to be as short as possible in my mind. So that means, going as quickly as you can from place to place. Gasoline stops are, hey, you've got the amount of time you have to go to the bathroom is how long it takes me to fill up the car. Some gasoline stops I would just, Jordy was 4, and I would just slide open the van door and kick her out and hurry back, I'll meet you at the end of the parking lot, basically. And so Ronnie pulls me to the side at one of these stops at a gas station somewhere in probably New Mexico. And he said, hey, you're making this miserable for everybody. And I was so mad. But he was so right. He was so right. And it was this tough conversation that I needed a good friend to have with me to help me see what a jerk I was being. And that conversation changed my life. Real short, real brief. Parking. Yeah. Hey, it's getting better. Don't complain. Yeah. But that conversation changed my life, and literally, and it really changed life for my kids and my wife as well. Made things better. And hopefully for their kids, and on for generations, because one little conversation in a gas station parking lot. And I can think of countless conversations I've had with people through the years, specifically about sin, having these kind of tough conversations. Who looks forward to stepping into those kind of conversations? Pedro's like, no one does. Every one of those is like an episode of Dirty Jobs. I feel like I have to put on all this protective gear, and walk in and sit down, And occasionally you have to kind of, risk your life. I remember getting with Michael Payne one time and kind of calling him out on something, and he looked at me and he goes, normally if somebody said something like that to me, I'd kick their butt. But he didn't say butt. He said, I'd kick their butt. He said, but I know where your heart is. I know what you're trying to do. And so we risk this. We have these conversations, because we're trying to bring people closer to God. For the sake of the other person. And I remember hearing Ronnie once say, it's really not that hard to be someone's best friend. And that's not a statement about how good a friend I am, or he is, or really any one of us can be. I think it's really a statement about how terrible and shallow most friendships in the world are. And so as disciples, we have this opportunity to step into people's lives and just through a little Christian-focused, Christ-minded effort to make significant changes in people's lives. Significant. I had a friend who owns a plumbing business come over once, and he was replacing our water heater, and he brought his brother with him who had just gotten out of prison. He had served like 7.5 years on an attempted murder charge. And so this guy walks in and tatted up, and I kind of start talking to him a little bit, and I just felt like this call, like this guy needs a friend. Like, I mean, he literally had just gotten out of prison like that week or within probably a few weeks. And so I text my friend. I said, "Hey, can I have your brother's number? I'd like to send him a message." And so I sent this message to this guy, and I don't know this guy, but he was in my garage for 10 minutes, And I said, "Hey, I know you're just kind of coming out of prison, and you might not have any friendships back here that are," because he had been away again for almost 8 years. And I said, I'm willing to be your friend if you'd like to, be friends. And I hit send, and I was like, this is so strange. But again, I felt called to it. I'm sure he's looking at it like, what is this guy doing? And he just replied, I would like that. And so it just started this little, this friendship with him for many, many years now. And I've had opportunity after opportunity to be with him and serve him and model Christ for him. And what has that done for him? Sometimes I look at his life and I'm like, I don't know if I've had any impact here. But, the growth is up to God. I feel like our part is to go in and step into those situations and be the friend that God's calling us to. So, question for you. Do your friendships cost you something? Do you have friendships to begin with? Do they cost you something? What would your friend group look like if you defined friendship with these parameters that we've talked about this morning of sacrificial love? And can you think of friends right now that you have sacrificed for? Can you think of some of those? Can you think of friends you have who have sacrificed for you? And so some practicals here, really I can just repeat what I told you from above about Jesus, is spend time with people. Make time for people. Grow to know and understand them. Ask the tough questions. Walk with them in life. Share meals and enjoy fellowship with them. And build that trust, and then find the joy in your service to them. Have those tough conversations. Ask the tough questions. Love deeply. For friendship, ultimately, this kind of sacrificial, godly friendship is about loving people well. That's what it is. It's about loving people well. And so thinking of, love and friendship and all that stuff, I want to read to you 1 Corinthians 13 with, friendship inserted where love normally is, and then we'll wrap it up. Friendship is patient. Friendship is kind. Friendship does not envy. Friendship does not boast. It's not proud. Friendship does not dishonor others. Friendship is not self-seeking. Friendship is not easily angered. Friendship keeps no record of wrongs. Friendship does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Friendship always protects. It always trusts. Friendship always hopes, and friendships always persevere. So kind of going back to that original question of how can friendship be considered a spiritual discipline? Well, it's pretty difficult for most people. It takes, like a lot of the other disciplines, it takes a lot of sacrifice and intentionality. It causes us to look beyond ourselves, to get past who we are by default and be somebody who God is calling us to be. And it forces us to walk in the footsteps of Jesus and love people really, really well. So we're going to enter into some community sharing time. I'll hand the mic to James here. He can walk it around. And our prompt for this is just, how have you seen sacrificial love modeled in one of your friendships? So we'll just get 6 or 8 people to share. How have you seen sacrificial love modeled in one of your friendships?